I'll be going over how to set up a train system that will go to the mine where it will be filled up by a resource, and then it needs to have multiple drop-offs. In this case, that could be an outpost where you just need stone, and you have a second outpost that also needs stone. I want the train stops to be inactive once there's a big enough buffer. In this case, when I have 1,000 stone, I personally find circuit conditions to be a bit daunting, so that's why I want this video to exist. To begin with, I'll simply have one train stop on the left where we pretend I have a mine, and then my train track will split into two, which will simulate going to an actual drop-off. And it will be a two-headed train just because it's easier to visualize. The important trick here is that the drop-offs must have the same name, because then you can say go to any station with that name, and then the train will look at which of these stations have been activated, and then it can decide which of the two to go to. So in this case, I could call this stone drop off. I don't want to use the name stone drop because that's what I used up above where I practiced. And if I hold down shift right click on the station, I can shift left click and it will copy the name. I now have two stations with the name stone drop off. If we go over here and set up the scheduling, I can see the stone drop off has two stops. I also need to give this a name, which will then be stone mine 1. The train should go to the stone mine and say that it needs at least, I'm just going to say 1,000 items, so 1,000 stone. That should be turned around. And this is all I really need, because once I've inactivated the drop-offs, because they have enough items, then the second step will be inactive, which means this is just a loop. So it starts at stone mine 1, tries to go to the drop-off, but because there's no drop-off, it simply keeps looping and repeating step 1. I'm going to copy this setup, which is just some debug options. These boxes have infinite stone. These will load items at 90 items per second. You can see that this will fill up very quickly because these are so fast. And since there's no drop off, it will be stuck at stone mine 1. But I want that to be off right now. Then remember to fuel it. I'm going to copy these just to connect the wires to an electric pole, because then I can see what the count is currently. And then connect that from the pole to the actual train stop. So there's no items inside the boxes. If I just add some stone, I can see there's now 156. These boxes output 156 stone, and I can use that in my train stop. So I need to say mode of operation, enable, disable, and I can say this is enabled only if the amount of stone is less than 1000, which it currently is because the count is 156. So this train stop is enabled. I can then repeat the process down here. And because I did shift right click, shift left click, the activation has also been copied. When I then add the stone drop off, I need to give it a condition to say that I want it to stay there until I either have an empty cargo or I have some amount of inactivity. And I need this to stay at all, so either of these conditions have been met. If it's empty, then immediately go back to the mine. And if it can't output anything because the boxes are full, then it needs to go back. And if I did everything right, then it will work. So it first goes up, where the count will quickly go above 1000, but the train is still at the station, which means it will keep outputting. So even though the train stop has been inactivated because the count is greater than 1000, the train will keep outputting because it will keep going until it either has an empty cargo or it's inactive. So even though it's not allowed to go there, it will stay at the stop until the train's condition has been met, even though the train stop has been deactivated, because the train is still at the stop and its condition is to stay until it's either empty or it's inactive. Which is why this outpost has more than 1000 stone, because the train kept outputting stone even though the train stop was inactive. Now that both train stops have been disabled, because the count of stone at both stops is greater than 1000, the train now can't go anywhere because they have been disabled, which means it will keep sitting at the station and being filled. You can always play around with what the condition should be before it's allowed to go to the stone drop off. In this case, it could also be inactivity or until it's waited a certain amount of time, because otherwise the instant it has 1000 stone, it will go to the drop off if one is enabled, which means it will only ever have more than 1000 stone if both train stops have been disabled, which means it can only deposit 1000 stone because it will immediately leave the station once it has 1000. So I could say that it should wait some amount of time. I'm just going to say 7 seconds because it will load so quickly. Now that the train has exactly 1000 stone, it will go, and that means you can only deposit 1000. Then when it gets back, Actually, I'd want to make that an and, so it has to wait at least 7 seconds. Then I can just redo this. Now it will be filled, but 7 seconds haven't passed, which means it will keep being filled. It can give more than 1,000 stone, so it won't go until both conditions have been met. And then it deposits stone, and it can deposit more than 1,000 because it has more. And again, it will only go back to the mine if it's empty or it's inactive. So once more, it has 2,000 stone. It goes to the bottom, drop off, where it's now empty, and then it goes back to the mine because both drop-offs have been disabled. And then now the first condition is met, and it keeps waiting, and this will just loop until one of the drop-offs will be enabled. And now 7 seconds will pass, so both conditions are met, and there is a drop-off available. So it goes to drop off 2,000 stone, and then it goes back. It seems daunting, but I think it's fine if you understand the logic at least. Make sure to disable the train stop. Make sure both train stops have the same name. And then I'd add multiple conditions, both for when it's allowed to leave the drop off and when it's allowed to leave the mine. So, yep,